I don't know, but I've been told uranium ore's worth more than gold. I sold my cad, I bought me a Jeep, I got that bug and I can't sleep. Uranium fever has gone and got me down. Uranium fever is spreading all around. With a Geiger counter in my
Welcome to
hand.
Pandora's Box. This is the podcast where we talk about our favorite fandoms in terms of our thoughts, theories, and opinions. We also like to do a little production analysis as well as story dissection. My name is Tyler Gardner, and I am joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Christian Almonte.
I don't want to set the world. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this wonderful Fallout. I mean, this is the RPG segment of the
Yes.
Box. For those that don't know, it's a song in Fallout. Actually, I just realized that people don't know what this is.
Yes, but you just started warbling off some 1920. Yeah, so as Christian was so nicely introducing us via song, we will be discussing the Fallout universe. From my understanding, we'll be discussing the video game itself, a lot of the backstory and surrounding lore of that game.
Yep.
How much of the mechanics of the game itself, I'm not so sure how much you're going to dive into that. Or are we strictly keeping this as more of a story world building?
I'm doing a lot of the production history behind Fallout, because there actually is a decent amount of knowledge and a decent amount of hands that Fallout has gone into in terms of video game development.
Okay.
So I kind of wanted to bring those up first, just so people kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's both interesting for those that would be new to this, and also for those that kind of are just looking through Fallout podcasts and kind of wanted a little bit more information. Because there's a lot to Fallout, and I am happy to be kind of re-exploring it. After all, I've said this to you, I think maybe in one or two episodes, but off camera as well. Fallout New Vegas is my favorite video game of all time.
Yeah, you might have mentioned that.
Which is saying something, because Kenshi's my favorite PC video game, but Fallout New Vegas just has that spot, that number one of all-timer, the GOAT, as they say. And there isn't. I was about to say there isn't a bad Fallout, but then I made eye contact in '76. But for the most part, there is not a bad Fallout. And
is it a fair comparison that Fallout 76 is to you is what the prequel or the sequel Star Wars trilogy is to me? It's just like, I don't know.
That is pretty bad.
I don't know how bad it is on your scale in terms of they really dropped the ball on this.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think just in general, it's kind of like the Disney takeover.
Yeah,
where it's kind of like it's just disappointing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, they've tried their best to try and fix it. I just kind of haven't.
Yeah, I think with that one, they started out so poorly. It's like no matter what you put in, nobody's gonna forgive you for it.
Which is funny because they came out with some of the best games and the best documentaries right before this game dropped. So it was kind of like
documentaries.
Yeah, they have documentaries online
for Fallout.
Mm-hmm.
Documentary Fallout.
The Fallout for also Bethesda games in general, like the entire course of the Elder Scrolls and Fallout back to back in the studio's production of it. It's great. There's a great interview or documentary company, I guess you would call it, called No Script.
Okay.
And they did one, and actually I referenced some of that from the knowledge that they presented in the documentary itself, because they go to Bethesda Game Studio in Bethesda, Maryland, or Rockville, Maryland, or whatever.
I'm gonna check those out. I did not realize there were documentaries about this stuff, because I knew just how expansive it was, but
yeah. But Bethesda Game Studios is a massively successful.
Oh yeah.
They made Skyrim.
Yeah.
They made Fallout, Oblivion, Morrowind,
Wolfenstein. I just found out, what was it, a couple weeks ago, they made Doom.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
About to say Doom.
I looked when he said that. I was like, what? They didn't. I did not realize how many different pies Bethesda had.
They have a discography.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Tyler, what do you know in terms of Fallout? So you've played some Fallout, from what I've heard.
Me personally, I've played Fallout 4. Okay. Short of that, I believe it or not, I actually watched my brother play New Vegas more than I played Fallout 4.
Yeah,
he would play Fallout New Vegas quite a bit on PC actually, and I was very invested. But I was always kind of the games themselves kind of threw me off. Just because it just felt like it could happen, like it was a little too real world.
A little too realistic.
I was just very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is unsettling. Yeah, so let's get into it. So what is Fallout? So Fallout is a series of post-apocalyptic role-playing games set in various locations within the continental United States. The series splays out in an alternate timeline from our history, starting at the development of nuclear power and the use of it to the end of World War II, proceeding whence thereof into the 1950s with the Cold War and the Red Scare, which we just brought up.
Yeah.
Which, and for those that don't know too much of U.S. history, the Red Scare was kind of the major fear factor of communism spreading quite consistently. Which in turn led up to the Vietnam War to prevent communism.
Yeah, so that was a lot of ideological, and then after the usage of the nuclear bombs in World War II, that scare was still there because other countries had also developed their war or those weapons, and then there was like, since there was no war, it's like, well, what do we do with these things? Like, oh, we're just gonna threaten each other with them.
Yeah, the MOAB, the mother of all bombs, because everyone knew that if we used those on a consistent basis, we wouldn't have any Earth left.
No.
So that's why the idea was just, well, we're not going to use these. Instead, we're just going to mass as many as we can.
Yeah, we're just going to stockpile them for whatever reason.
The biggest stick, I guess, in the competition, which is...
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how that became a thing. That being said, though, so the way that the pathline, or the timeline rather, diverges is because instead of, at the end of, in our history, the end of World War II, we kind of shelf these nuclear bombs. We don't go too in depth with nuclear fission and all that stuff.
Yeah, not even just the bombs, if I remember correctly, because I just kind of want to know if I'm correct about the history of Fallout, whereas, like, we turned away from nuclear power as a whole in terms of everything, not just weapons. But in Fallout, they went ass deep into it, they didn't even get away from like vacuum tube technology, which is why everything stayed so clunky and big, which led to like the resource wars of like way later on.
Oh wow, yeah, you know much more than I figured. Essentially what happens is instead of shelving it, we kind of utilized it as the main source of all we did, from technology to economics, so on and so forth. And on the bright side of it, it led to a major technological advance. Yeah. But on the negative side, we ran out of resources fast as shit.
Yeah, because cars were still made out of steel, things.
They were nuclear powered cars.
Nuclear power steel cars, because for us, we turned to making cars lighter using aluminum. Pretty much everything. And we also were trying to like get this huge wave of like condensing our technology, making it smaller, versus with Fallout, because they had the nuclear power, they didn't change that. So everything still stayed big.
Everything stayed big, yeah, and everything kind of stayed with that whole aesthetic of the 1950s and 60s. Kind of that whole stereotypical white picket fenced households, those old kind of commercials.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's what we find so funny, because I don't know the actual years of like the Fallout, but you have like from 1950.
Yeah, I'll go to them.
Okay, yeah, but it just seems like for hundreds of years, like everything just stayed the same. Not just like the technological changes, but the society as a whole just were able to stay in that era, which is that's a really cool like thing to think about.
Yeah, they still were playing like freaking whoever else, Dean Martin, all these other guys, the Ink Spots, which is the opening songs for Fallout 3. Was that kind of that old school song? So anyway, what might surprise people who are unfamiliar with Fallout and its game series is that did you know, Tyler, that Fallout has not always been a Bethesda IP?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. Not a whole lot of people know this. So Bethesda, the Fallout title and IP was originally the property of a company called Interplay. Now, for those that don't know anything about Interplay, that don't know anything about anything else, the Fallout title was also not the first thing of Interplay. So there are layers deep to this. So 1988. We're going back a bit, before Tyler was born, before I was born, before we were even conceived or thought of.
Definitely was not thought of.
Yeah.
20 years before my birth.
Oh, of course. So this company, Interplay, decided that they wanted to explore the concept of the post-apocalypse. Now, remember at the time, there weren't as many post-apocalyptic games as there are today. It's a very common thing. Like, post-apocalyptic wasn't even a word, really. Yeah. That wasn't even a genre that people explored. So the idea of the destruction after a cataclysmic event of the United States wasn't really thought of as a common thing.
That would make sense, because they're still pretty fresh even back then from like the Vietnam War, and I can absolutely understand that. No, we as a society don't want to like act like this is a recreational theme,
especially because we had a lot of hope, because Star Wars came out just about 10 years prior, which brought cinema out of that kind of early 70s, like, Dirty Harry and Earthquake and all those like really like gritty anti-hero movies.
Yeah.
So like after the Vietnam War had ended, Star Wars kind of brought people together with that whole kind of like, oh shit, it's a new hope.
Yeah.
That kind of, it was a very societal thing, which has also contributed to part of the success of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, 10 years later, had the kind of this company that decided they're going to try and explore this concept, and so they created a video game known as Wasteland. Now, does that sound familiar to you, Tyler?
No.
So, for those of there that might remember, Wasteland 2 and Wasteland 3 are popular RPGs to this day. Wasteland 2 came out in 2014 when we were graduating high school, and in 2020, Wasteland 3 came out and was like the biggest show of that year.
Wasteland 3 came out when?
2020.
Oh.
Yeah, fairly recently.
These PC games?
Wasteland 2 was Xbox. I played it first on Xbox. Xbox, PC, consoles, and whatnot. But basically, they set it as Wasteland. This is once again before Wasteland also changed hands. By the way, it's not a Interplay IP anymore. But anyway,
does Interplay still exist?
Kind of.
Or now dissolved?
I mean, Interplay, and which I'll go into it. They've always had financial issues. Been struggling kind of for 39 years. They've been struggling. They went from a developer though into kind of a publisher, so they kind of publish games anymore. So you never really hear them. They are technically there is a game that's supposed to be in the works right now that they are kind of co-publishing, but I don't really know too much about the current state of affairs at Interplay. So it's an open world post-apocalyptic RPG. Wasteland is set in nuclear devastated United States. Does that sound a little familiar to you?
No. Should it?
So not only is this a setting for Fallout, but for hardcore RPG gamers, you might have heard of In Exile's 2014 classic Wasteland 2. More recently, the 2020 release of Wasteland 3. Same franchise. You've heard of In Exile games before, right?
In Exile?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, they're fairly common. I could probably list them off after the episode.
If I know the titles that they were involved with.
But moving back to Interplay and Fallout, Interplay at the time was not a publisher and had used EA, Electronic Arts, to distribute their game. This came at a price, however, because when the game became a critically acclaimed success and was financially profitable, the company decided to become a publisher themselves. This, however, proved an issue, one of many Interplay have faced in their time, and this was that they couldn't negotiate the IP back from EA.
Yeah.
Because obviously, when you give someone a massively popular game, they're not going to be like, yeah, we'll give it
back to you. Oh, yeah, here you go.
So,
that was great.
What do you mean?
Thanks for the check.
This is ours. What do you mean now?
Yeah, so they couldn't make the third one.
I'm the captain now.
Yeah, so they couldn't make the third one without EA.
No, they could not. They couldn't make the second one without EA. The company, Interplay, was still determined to make their post-apocalyptic game, especially now that they had like that taste of success.
Mm-hmm.
So they took the positives from Wasteland and created a brand new series known as Fallout. And this is we enter the world of the Fallout series with Fallout 1, I guess, just called Fallout. So Interplay creates Fallout, Fallout 2, and a kind of a spin-off later on in like 2004, I think. I could be wrong about that. Brotherhood of Steel. Actually, no, I have the list right here. So Fallout was 1997 when it was finally came out.
Wow.
Yep, Fallout was 1997. Fallout 2, a year later, was 1998. And then Fallout Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel, was a 2004 game. They were all created by Interplay. They featured isometric gameplay, similar to Wasteland. There was no third person or first person yet. It was more similar to kind of those old school turn-based, action point style RPGs. You kind of selected something, however many action points that you would do that action.
Yeah.
Similar to kind of how most kind of PC RPGs were back then.
Mm-hmm.
Even JRPGs, because JRPGs kind of revolutionized that with Final Fantasy, where that combat became a little bit more fun to use.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why a lot of Final Fantasy still uses turn-based to this day, even like some of the newer ones. They also had those old-fashioned cutscenes, which I don't know if you kind of remember from those old PC days. They kind of had those weird little animations, kind of like how in Odd's World or what have you, they were kind of janky, but like they were charming in their own kind of way. After these ones are done, they kind of introduced Fallout. They got the whole shtick. A lot of stuff, and I was surprised too because I had played Fallout, the first Fallout, prior or afterwards, 3, New Vegas, and 4. So I had played all the modern ones
and
before
you went
going
back and
back to
played
the
the
old
old
one.
one?
Yeah. And
What'd you think?
The old Fallout's good. I didn't connect with it as much, simply because it is just so much different at that point, because
Yeah.
you know things iterate and change. But there were some things that were surprisingly similar, like a lot of those old school sound effects, like you know you hear when you open up the Pip Boy.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
you hear those like sound effects and you're like clicking through things.
Mhm.
That was there even back then.
Oh, okay.
Like those sound effects are over 20 years old, man. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And a lot of the, you know, the Pip Boy was still around. Vault Tech was still around. That whole kind of shtick with the 1950s.
It's kind of nice. You haven't gotten into it yet, but I'm assuming obviously Bethesda somehow gets a hold of Fallout, and they kept a lot of this shit.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
It
Because
is
a lot of
kinda
times they'll take something and they'll warp it and
Yeah.
morph it, and they'll just feel like there can't be any remnants from where it came from
Yeah.
for whatever reason. But that's kind of refreshing.
Yeah. There was, I guess it was a classy takeover,
Yeah.
you'd say. Oh yeah, Bethesda Game Studios. Let's go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So this leads. So 39.
Oh, is this our jumping ahead thing?
Yeah, jumping ahead thing. It's so much so that I had to reopen it just to figure out that I was jumping ahead again. So, what are these fucking images right here, my friend?
Yeah. So, what we have in front of us is a slide with a couple different pictures. The first one is some random person who I've never seen before, don't know their name. The second one is a man with a green and black... No, I'm just kidding. The second image is a picture of God Howard.
And then, so, yeah, essentially what it is I, you know, because I love Bethesda Game Studios. I love, you know, Todd Howard and all that stuff. And I'm very up to date with their memes because, you know, they were a massive... Todd Howard's a massive meme for the longest time, especially with his, like, concept of it just works, where, you know, people were just, like, you know, pointing out all the glitches in his software, and he's like, oh, it just works, you know, that kind of thing. But then also he, like, said, what was it, degenerates or whatever, when people were just... I don't know, for someone said something, like, suggestive at, like, one of the live events, where I forget what it was. Oh god, it's gonna embarrass me that I don't know the origins of the whole meme.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, Todd Howard has always been a meme. He's a great guy. He's the director of you know, Bethesda Game Studios over in Maryland, and I'm gonna go into, you know, his whole story as well as the Bethesda Game Studios story, because they just have a really interesting, you know, backstory and pivot to it. But you know, this was one of my favorite fucking cosplays of all time. I just, instead of Todd Howard, he became God Howard. I dressed in a robe with his face on, with a staff made of all the Skyrims that they try to make not die ever, even though it's over 10 years old.
They just came out with another one too.
Yeah.
Guys, let it go.
And yeah, I basically would wander over to people and say, do you own like 30 copies of Skyrim? And if you don't, then you deserve Fallout 76. And I'll pull out like a bandaged version of Fallout 76. So there were layers to it. I know that's a lot to take in, but that's God Howard.
Cosplay.
Next to him is a random guy named Todd Howard. Also, I guess he just helps with the Packers. It has nothing to do with anything.
Wait, are you fucking serious?
I looked up Todd Howard images, and this guy popped up, and I'm like, all right, we're just gonna use this.
I was about to say, like, oh, maybe he's like, you know, runs Interplayer.
No, it's just some random dude.
Fucking idiot.
Just some random defensive lineman or whatever. But yes, on to Bethesda Game Studios and the wonderful Todd Howard. Basically, the story goes kind of like this. Todd Howard, you know, he worked his way up for, you know, Bethesda Game Studios. Eventually, like in Maryland, he got one of those old Wayne Gretzky hockey games back in the day, and it was made by Bethesda. And he and I think his wife got it for him. And he was like, dude, this is fucking great, you know, and wait, their studio is right nearby. So he drove over, you know, to their studio and like walked in there and like was walking around. Some woman just came up to him and was like, you know, can I help you? You know, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, man, I love your games. I would love to work for you someday. And from there, you know, he got his, you know, first kind of position in there and moved his way up really fast. Eventually he became kind of like the game head. And after that, you know, they had started making some really good games at Bethesda. They had made a lot of the Terminator games back in the day when Terminator was really popular.
Yeah.
Just about every studio made Terminator games because, you know, that was the big thing.
Yeah.
And I think the IP was just useful for everybody. It didn't matter. But eventually they started hitting up some big stuff. They were like, hey, we're gonna make some fun Elder Scrolls games, and they made a lot of the old ones like Daggerfall and some of the really ancient ones, Arena, and
Yeah, that's their original. Like they started.
yeah, that was their
I
own
was
IP.
born and raised.
Yeah.
Bethesda.
And eventually they make a really successful one, which is
Morrowind.
Yeah, that was a massive boost for the company. Because you have to remember the company was tiny as hell.
Yeah.
They used to be like shipping them out manually. Like they would go into the basement and like package those CDs, slap them together, and ship them out themselves, like the game devs.
It's so hardcore.
I know, yeah. So boots on the ground. It's so cool. With the success of Morrowind, they get bigger. The company starts to realize that they can do more and more things. Eventually, they start making Oblivion.
Mm.
And as they're making Oblivion, they're like, this is like a AAA title. It's going to take us like 4 years to make this shit. And, it's going to be a console, of course, because, Morrowind was the first kind of Xbox console game.
Oh, yeah.
And then the Xbox 360, I think they missed the launch window on it. I forget because they were taking, so long to do it. But eventually, there was a corporate decision that was just like, hey, it's going to be like 4 years of us being kind of quiet because we got a massive, IP. We got Oblivion coming, essentially. And it's going to be for like, we're doing this for console. And, that's hard from a development perspective because it's like a brand new console.
Yeah,
Xbox 360 is a brand new console. So on and so forth and yada, yada, yada. So they said, in the meanwhile, we need something else spinning up in the meanwhile. We need to have some other thing that we're doing. Like we can't just like be on. We can't be signing checks for nothing, no return for 4 years straight.
Yeah.
We need to make something. Eventually, Todd Howard, he's just like, dude, I loved playing those old Interplay, Wasteland games, and the first 2 Fallouts were amazing. We should make our own post-apocalyptic thing. And he like had this kind of dumb name that he said he made. It was like Apocalypse Road or something like that, which
garbage.
Very interesting title that no one
sounds like
inspired many.
It sounds like a song.
Yeah, it sounds like a song from like a really bad indie band.
Anyway, here's Oblivion Road.
Yeah,
Apocalypse Road.
his like homies over there is just like, but wait, no, that's what you're describing is Fallout. He's like, yeah, but we don't have Fallout, and they're like, gas you. So like,
they're like, why don't we just get
1 year later, Todd Vaughn, another Todd, which is hilarious. He puts a fucking sticky note on Todd Howard's desk and she's like, dude, I got Fallout, it's yours. And Todd Howard's like, are you fucking kidding me? Because apparently he knew someone at Interplay. They knew that Interplay they were struggling hardcore. They're not using the IP. So they managed to acquire it. And then Todd Howard's like, dude, we're gonna make this amazing.
Yeah, so what you were saying before, at that point, Fallout was 100% Interplay's IP.
Yep. It was what they made. They made 3 games, fairly successful games. Once again, because they were struggling because they were publishing and developing at the same time.
Yeah.
There's also some kind of there's a lot of inner intrigue that goes on based on like how it all happened.
Yeah.
But essentially, Bethesda acquires Fallout 3. All right. Yeah. I found 2 glitchy pictures of Oblivion. But yeah, so essentially, Oblivion created the apocalypse. If it weren't for the need of Bethesda to make another game, they wouldn't have come up with it. So we can thank Elder Scrolls for the existence of the modern Fallouts, which is kind of interesting. So Fallout 3 is risky because you got to remember Fallout 3 is post 9/11. So the destruction of nuclear apocalypses and the ruined capital city and all that stuff it was very touchy. It was kind of, even though like obviously post-apocalyptic wasn't new at this point,
because this one's set in DC.
This one's set in Washington D.C.
Yeah, and they had they had the Pentagon.
Yeah, they had
that was also hit around 9/11.
Yeah, they had this ruined Capitol building as like the cover art, and they bought ads in the metro. Of like the DC area.
I'm sure that.
And like even the graphic designers were like, yeah, are we sure we're good with this? Like, is this
kind of?
This is kind of And then I told you the story
the guy got
just the other day.
Yeah. Because
around this time, post 9/11, he's running around taking pictures.
I've heard this story multiple times, so I think you need to tell again for anybody else who's listening, because I've heard this story multiple times.
Yeah. So one of the lead art designers of Fallout 3, he decided to go because there's no wrecked, thank God, there's no wrecked Capitol building right now.
Yeah.
So he had to make one. In order to do that, he had to figure out, what elements of the Capitol building, would look, good and all this stuff. And, basically how artists are. I can't really describe it any better than he needed reference photos. So he goes out, tries to get reference photos in the DC area, and he takes pictures of all these like secure state buildings. And eventually he realizes as he's taking pictures that he's taking pictures of a very angry looking guard who like basically comes up to him after a while and is like, you need to leave like immediately. Like he didn't want any questions asked.
Yeah.
Like you gotta go. And he's just like reflecting on it, he's just like, I made sure not to do that again. Because it's like a security risk.
Yeah. Just gotta walk around.
But he ended up getting enough reference photos to kind of make that whole the DC area of Fallout 3 look post-apocalyptic. And it does. Honestly, Fallout 3 looks the most destroyed out of all the games, I think, in my opinion. So Fallout 3 had some cool stuff to it. They kind of kept with that whole Vault-Tec theme. They kept a lot of the stuff that Interplay had used. Vault-Tec was still around. The Vault Boy was still there. They kept VATS, which was interesting. So do you know what VATS stands for in the Fallout universe, Tyler?
Something automatic targeting system.
Yeah. It's like virtually assisted targeting system.
Virtually assisted.
So that was kind of what they utilized for the old turn-based things.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you would click on it, would highlight in like a neon green.
Oh, and you're setting up your turn essentially,
Yeah.
and then like something would happen, then you'd see like the fulfillment of
Exactly.
your VAT. Oh, that's cool because then later on they morphed it into just that's something you could just do in combat in real time.
Yeah, because they used to be only turn-based.
I could definitely see VATS as being that's not a bad method for turn-based though.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting because it went with the lore of everything,
Yeah.
So eventually, and Fallout 3 came along. Bethesda was just kind of like, well, what do we do with VATS? Because we're going to go into real time, first person and third person. What do we use it for? And they had to kind of navigate a fine line because they're like, well, is this a superpower? Is it just like something that's inherent with the technology?
Because if you're constantly using the VATS.
Yeah. So eventually they made it so that it's kind of like you have the Pip-Boy and it assists you with the targeting, so you can target certain limbs and all that stuff. Eventually they changed it and refined it a little bit in Fallout 4 where you don't necessarily stop time, you just slow it down so you can calculate or whatever. And so that's kind of where VATS kind of kept in. So that's one of the cool things. You were mentioning some cool stuff that they carried over, and I thought that was cool because they could have gotten rid of VATS. That was really that was just an action point system. Like you could have just D&D'd that shit out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was cool that they kept that.
Well, I think that just speaks to kind of the integrity of the company. It's like if it works and it seems good, this will connect to people who've played these games before. There's no reason to get rid of it. Because I think a lot of other companies, when they buy IPs, they trash everything just to kind of wipe the floor of anything that it came from their predecessors, it's just terrible.
Yeah,
it's so just cruel and unnecessary.
Yeah, so Fallout 3 really skyrockets, the post-apocalyptic genre actually when it's released. It was released, I think, in 2008. 2008, yeah, late October of 2008.
I don't know if you're going to go into it or if you have it. Were there any other post-apocalyptic games around that same time?
Around the same time?
Was the genre in any sort of place when Fallout came out? Because I know when Wasteland came out,
yeah,
that was kind of the breach into that territory.
That's tough. I'll have to see when Metro came out or any of those games. I'd have to check because timeline-wise, I'm not the best when it comes to game history, which I'll probably get better at over the course of the podcast.
Well, because you're about it with certain other things that you're aware of the society and what the era and the fields are when certain things come out. So that was my curiosity.
I think Fallout 3 was kind of because they lay heavy into the post-apocalyptic thing.
Oh, yeah.
Some games have tones of post-apocalypse, but these were
you're fully immersed. This is what this is about.
This is how society has shaped up.
Yeah. And
like you said at the beginning, it's very realistic. They don't shy away from the nitty gritty. Fallout 3 was interesting because it also was kind of limited based on the consoles at the time. Because remember in Xbox 360 days, a lot of the games were a lot smaller. They were 8 gigabytes or however much. Yeah. Nowadays, all you have to do is just tag on an extra memory system or download some more stuff. But back in the day, it all had to fit on that CD.
Yeah.
That CD-ROM, and that was the issue they had with Oblivion. That's why Oblivion had 5 voice actors, because they had to cut out just so much voice just so it would fit on the disc.
Yeah, there's only so much space on the disc. That's why I think they changed over to installing the game onto the console.
Yeah, that's why
which makes sense, but then it gave them an excuse to just blow these fucking games up.
That's why the male orc is the same as the male red guard or whatever you have. So in Fallout 3, what they did to kind of help with that, because the original idea was that there was going to be a lot of factions involved in Fallout 3. You need joinable factions. But that never ended up panning out because they were trying to focus on kind of refining it and getting it what they had.
You think the factions? You think they brought that idea over from the Elder Scrolls? Because that was a big part of the Elder Scrolls. Is Thieves Guild, Assassins Guild, Fighters Guild.
Eventually, when we go into New Vegas, they restore factions in New Vegas, which is cool. You have a bunch of you can make areas mad at you or happy with you.
Oh yeah.
This, that, and the other thing, which is always funny to me because I used to have it in Fallout New Vegas. There's a town called Freeside, I think, which basically once you enter the New Vegas area, that whole strip, the outskirts are kind of the poor area of Freeside, and then you go in further and you get to the strip, which is a kind of the actual New Vegas, like with all the casinos and all that shit.
Mm.
But I remember I would always have like this really like I would either like I would have such a difference between the two. Like on the outskirts of the city, like I was hated because I would just shoot the crap out of everyone for no reason. And then, but then as soon as I went into the strip, I was a respectable human being and individual.
That's a good guy. I like that guy.
Like I would have people coming up and giving me gifts, and then I would have people like in Freeside coming up trying to rob me, realizing who I am, and then running away. And I'm like, dude, the factions were just a wild component to Fallout New Vegas. But in Fallout 3, it was just kind of the Brotherhood of Steel, the Vault Dwellers, I guess you would say, and you kind of were the hero that helped everybody without kind of joining a faction, if that made any sense.
So there aren't really like even rival factions, like the two main bad guys. They sometimes have.
I mean, kind of. I mean, you can make people mad at you, sure, but it wasn't like kind of a. I wouldn't describe it as such. No.
Okay.
But yeah, go to the next slide.
Sure.
All right.
What the fuck?
What the fuck?
Is Fallout?
Is Fallout all about? Yeah, and I had to keep up with the theme with the fuck. So, Tyler, you know a little bit about kind of literally the Fallout into Fallout.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about it? You already listed off the Great War.
So, from my understanding, the Fallout universe, as we've touched on earlier, was branched off immediately from the end of World War II, which was the introduction in real world. That was the introduction of nuclear technology. And it seemed like how the Fallout timeline works is they just stuck with it, and they just went full bore into developing and refining nuclear technology. And it seems like what they found was they didn't have to reduce the size of the technology, because they kept like the vacuum tube technology for a lot of different things. That's why like the Pip-Boys are so big, simply because they had such a powerful energy when they harnessed the nuclear technology. And I don't think they realized like just because you can lift 50 tons of steel all the time doesn't mean you should just be constantly processing or using 50 tons of steel.
Right.
So yeah, what is it, like 100, 200 years later after World War II, nuclear technology is incorporated into like every section of society, whereas like we use all different sorts of processes like computer microchips and things of that nature. That wasn't there in the Fallout universe, and the nuclear technology and the resources that were used obviously depleted those resources, leading to the Great War, which is pretty much all different countries vying for resource control. Ended up everybody just pushing their nuclear launch button at the same time, just ripping everything to shreds. And at that point, then we have the Fallout. And that was also the big thing with the vaults, because the vaults were developed because I'm sure a lot of people realized how bad this was going to be. And I think there was some shady shit going on with why the vaults were created too. If I remember correctly, a lot of them most of them weren't even designed to actually keep humans alive. A lot of them were for like different experiments that they were testing on humans. So
yeah, this is very good, my friend. You got a very close approximation of all of that. So yeah. So what the fuck is Fallout all about? So I mean, in the modern day, and by that I mean like when the games take place, the nuclear apocalypse has happened.
Yeah.
There was no denying that. Basically, like how I said, and I'll go into it in just a moment, but multiple countries have launched nuclear weapons, demolishing major capital areas. DC's destroyed. San Francisco's. There's a line. I think they actually removed it. There was a line in New Vegas that they completely blown it off the map, and I think they removed it because they wanted it to maybe be an option for future games, just in case. But that's the kind of the level of it, where like whole recognized cities are just not there. And the radiation got incredibly bad, and those that survived were one of two types of people. You had the people that went into vaults and hid themselves in bunkers, which the vaults were great underground bunkers designed to house people for endless periods of time. Basically, they were self-sufficient, and granted, Tyler has mentioned that they were done by the Vault Tech, which was the decided company that would have the honor of making all these things, but Vault Tech itself was kind of a corrupt group of scientists who would do control group experiments on people.
I think one of them, they literally just left the vault door open to see what would fucking happen. When
some of them are pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Actually, in Fallout 4, you end up in one of those corrupt labs where it was a cryo lab.
Yeah, where they were going to put you to sleep to see what. Which,
unfortunately for 99.9% of the people in that cryo lab, they died.
You wake up with a bunch of bullet holes.
Yeah, they did die. I think it's because the cryo labs lost power in the wrong way or something. I
thought it was because those people went in and they
no.
They stole your son. I thought they killed everybody.
No. The institution didn't do that. The institution stole your son and shot your spouse.
Oh, that was it.
That's it. Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
No, because everybody else I think was already having issues or were dead or something like that. Because I think something lost power, but you were able to come out of it. I'd have to look. I haven't played the beginning of Fallout 4 in quite some time.
I don't know anything close enough to challenge thought. So
yeah.
I'm gonna take your word.
But essentially, I mean, you are right. Essentially, they were all just some fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And eventually, however many years later, the vault doors are opened, and people come out and realize, oh, life is livable again.
Yeah.
And they start repopulating the world. You get some crazy factions, like in New Vegas, you have the New California Republic, which involves the old military. You got the Brotherhood of Steel, which tries to, steal back old technology into the way it was. You have raiders, of course. You have regular farm folk. You have every major faction that you would acquire in all these places. So I'm not going to get too much into it. You also have just vault dwellers that just want to chill and be vault dwellers.
Yeah.
Like in Fallout 3, there was, they were going to be there for the longest time until your dad, Liam Neeson, decides to dip and come back and then dip again. There's also another variant of humans. Do you know who they are?
Like the mutants? Or are you talking about the robots? Like the synths?
No. This was years before the Institute.
No fucking idea.
The ghouls, my friend. The ghouls.
Oh yeah. Oh, those are the people that
they stayed
survive.
outside.
Yeah.
The radiation gave them they were like the Hobbit, bro. They were like Gollum.
I think wasn't there like
unnatural
a
life.
Not a joke, but in Fallout 4, you meet the guy who was trying to sell you a vault, like in the beginning of the game. And he's like, "You're alive. You're still alive."
Yeah, you meet the fucking Vault Tech representative, which is hilarious because of all the people that you would think would survive, it would be a Vault Tech member, but no, he's the one that got fucked up.
And he had been alive for
it's a cruel irony, yeah. You meet him in a fucking hotel. In fucking Good Neighbor or whatever.
That fucking rained.
Which is crazy. Alright. And we are on to the great history of Fallout.
Before the bombs fell.
So, Tyler, on the screen I have a few things that you might recognize. That picture in the upper right-hand corner is what the old households looked like in the pre-war era.
Yeah, anybody who's listening, just quite literally picture anything from the 50s or 60s. Mm-hmm. Like not the Jetsons, but...
Like the honey, I'm home.
Yeah,
like
quite literally.
That whole thing.
Yeah, you got the weird, like the light-colored walls. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And those who have played Fallout 4, which is the latest of the canonical, Fallouts with plot, because I would say 76, but that's more of a MMO kind of situation. Yeah. But Fallout 4, you start off as an old household that has that kind of mom and pops, conventional.
Quite literally like the white picket fence, like your perfect middle class suburb.
Exactly, and. You had these old posters that you see in the middle here, Tyler. So you had those kind of old school posters, which are, some of them are innocent, which like the super duper mart, simplicity, and then you have vacuum advertisements and radio advertisements and all that stuff. But then you also have the ones over like on the left-hand side, which is like people trying to, what do you call it? Propaganda to join the military.
Oh yeah. Death
the Red Scare is still there. Death is preferable alternative to communism.
Yeah.
And was it we'll drop the bombs first, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so people were already on edge and ready to set some shit off. And over in the left-hand corner, you see actually that's all images from Fallout 4's opening scene,
Yeah.
which kind of showed the war as it kind of continued. So, before the bombs fell, things were great, actually. Things were pretty good. Because, you know, way as soon as, you know, World War II ended, you know, the nations had a little bit of peace. I wouldn't say it's an incredible peace, but they had...
Much the same as what it was like in our life.
Yeah.
You know, rebuilding or revamping everything.
But, you know, there was those technological boons. You had, you know, power armor. You had self-sufficient robots that were, like, helping you out and, like, taking care of your kids, like, in the beginning of Fallout 4.
Yeah, the fuck was his name? I want to say Cogsworth.
Cogsworth, yeah. Cogsworth.
It was Cogsworth?
Yeah, Cogsworth, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Cogsworth, and then you have, like, nuclear-powered cars, nuclear-powered trains, transports. Everything was powered by uranium and fossil fuels. Which... Surprise, surprise! The fossil fuels and the uranium run out, leading up until the 2050s about, and you know this becomes massive because not only was it just you know this stuff, but it powered their electric grid. It powered you know everything that you could possibly imagine that you know modern day society runs on was by these you know fuels, and eventually it causes 3 catastrophic wars. The Sino-American Wars, the Resource Wars, and ultimately the Great War.
I didn't realize there were
which is the
3.
Big Boom Boom.
I knew there was some sort of like ongoing war. I didn't realize there was 3 separate.
Yeah, there were 3 separate wars. They all ended the same. Yeah, they all ended on the same date, October 23rd of 2077, Saturday specifically.
Wait, so these 3 wars were going on at the same time? Were they just wars?
Yes.
You probably didn't go to, but there were wars like just going on in different parts of the world with like different countries.
Kind of. I mean, the U.S. and China were the main contributors. So, for those that are wondering, the war's main 2 components were the communist China, which actually had a different name, I believe.
Yeah, it wasn't like
They were reformed over. This was part of the alternate history.
Not the Republic of China or something else.
I think it was similar to that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Basically, the United States and the Republic of China, they created these massive teams, I guess, against each other.
Mm-hmm.
A lot had happened. The global economy became unstable as of 2052, which promptly caused countries to attack each other for the finite resources and fossil fuels. This led to the United States annexing Canada. I don't know if you remember that, but we annexed Canada.
Yeah, I remember these weird little things.
Yeah, they're small like tidbits that you can find around Fallout. It's unlike Kenshi, they're not all like trying to be hidden. They're just small. You just find them in books and stuff. The European Commonwealth was attacking the Middle East. The United Nations got disbanded. To make matters worse, I didn't actually know this prior to looking this up, but in 2053, the new plague spread around the United States and it killed tens of thousands of people, and made the country close its borders, which is why you don't really hear much about the other countries in Fallout for the most part, because we were kind of isolationist. No cure was ever found, despite a ton of research. However, the research did pave the way for the FEV, which would become a big part of the Fallout universe.
FEV?
The FEV, yes. I always forget what the hell it stands for.
I'm about to ask you.
And yeah, they'd probably roast me on this later, which is fine. But the FEV, that whole program, led to the Super Mutants disaster, which made Super Mutants. Basically, I think it was...
So Super Mutants were around before the bombs dropped?
Yeah, this all happened around the same time, within the same however many year span. But essentially what happened with that was that they were trying to adapt humans fast as possible. Like, I don't know if it's fast evolution, something.
Yeah, they're trying to speed up evolution.
Basically, they were like, yeah, we need to have some guys that are immune to radiation because this shit's inevitable, this shit's gonna happen, we're gonna fucking do some shit, which I think happened on the East Coast. Or, sorry, on the West Coast, rather. And eventually Super Mutants made it all the way over to DC and all that area. I don't know too much about that whole deal, because that was a major issue with the Super Mutants, because they also kind of originated around the same area as like the Brotherhood of Steel. I think that was a major component to the first 2 Fallouts, which obviously I didn't play much of. But eventually, this disease, plague, causes that whole dilemma over there. And then in 2054, Fallout shelters were built under Project Safe House, a contract which was won by the iconic Vault Tech Company, which we all know is corrupt. So as fossil fuels resources shortened all the more, the United States prepared for war by establishing a defense in Anchorage, Alaska. You've probably heard of Anchorage in those games.
Probably.
They bring up Anchorage a lot. They don't mention much of it, but like a lot of people, they're like, oh, all these. I remember, being in the War of Anchorage or whatever. I think you, as a character in Fallout 4, I think you are a veteran from that. I could be wrong about that.
Well, he definitely was a veteran from the war. I don't remember his specifics where he was based.
But it was massive.
Based.
Yeah. That was a massive location because that's where the war's fuel reserves were stored.
Okay.
And then there were some other key events that happened. I think we invaded Mexico at some point.
Okay.
Some other shit happened along those lines. So the Sino-American War, it starts in the winter of 2066, where basically China and U.S. kind of formalized we're gonna fight each other. We're fighting each other right now.
Yeah.
And the Resource War, which led up to that, that started in 2052, and then eventually that all comes to a culmination on Saturday, October 23rd, which is one of the cool little pieces of flavor that you can find around in Fallout 4. Do you remember what's in the houses when you kind of explore them that you'll occasionally find decorations of?
Can't think of anything specific.
Yeah. So if you ever play Fallout 4 again, which, we might have to at some point, if you go to Sanctuary Hills and look around the houses over there, you'll still find Halloween decorations. You'll find plastic pumpkins.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah.
That's because they were all getting ready for Halloween before the bombs dropped, man. It's crazy to see like parts of that civilization still around 200 years later.
So let me see if I can kind of wrap this up a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So we have World War II, dropping of the nuclear bombs.
Correct.
All the world society was then starting to getting immersed into nuclear technology with the same utilization of fossil fuels.
Yeah, nuclear fission, the batteries, all that.
The world economies destabilized 2050, 2052, and then that right around the same time, that's when the resource wars started, between pretty much every single country, it seems like. And then there was the Sino-American War, which you were saying was very much that's when America and China dictated that they were against each other.
Yeah.
And then
that's when we were all expanding. We basically became two sides, and yeah.
And then after that,
about 11 years,
because the resource war was still going on.
Yeah.
United Nations Sino-American War started.
Yeah.
And then the Great War, was that just the dropping of all the bombs?
Yeah, it was over in basically a day because, as early as 3-something in the morning, the bombers were overhead and it was game over. Which is interesting too, and I always am curious about this just as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to know how it was like over on, in China and all that stuff. Because, supposedly we lost our missiles too.
Yeah.
And you would think that we were, effective because, China supposedly hasn't visited us since, even in the post-apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that that's the case. But who knows? Maybe China wasn't actually hit.
Be cool to if they go into it in later games to be and then there's this whole thriving future.
And they don't go to America.
Oh, fuck that wasteland.
Yeah, they don't go to America because they think it's still irradiated or something. I mean, it'd be kind of interesting.
That'd be a really cool turn.
Yeah, we've only had it in the continental U.S., so who knows what the other countries.
You know how thrown off you'd be though if you get into a vault, let's say you're China and you hear the air raid sirens go off, right? The nuclear fallout, the sirens going off, and then when you open up the vault, it's just a normal society. There's no fallout. There's no destruction.
It's just a 200-year more advanced.
Yeah, everyone's just lived underground for a couple of years. Yeah. They hear some explosions, but they don't know what it is.
They survived. They found other resources. It's all.
Or it's they weren't, like you said, they weren't really hit. They'll have certain sections that were hit.
Yeah.
But for the most part, this society on that side of the world is totally fine.
It is crazy to think about.
That'd be cool.
Because we know all of our shit got hit. We know our capital was hit. We know that West Coast was hit. We know that Boston was hit. Blah 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 blah. The whole point of Fallout 76 is that not a whole lot of West Virginia was hit because who the fuck's bombing coal miners? Because we didn't run on coal. Yeah. But I think that would be interesting to dive into. But I think at this point we have reached the start of all the other Fallout games. Because once again, like I said before, it's either you were, born and survived off in a vault, or you somehow managed to survive as a ghoul. Which are kind of these horrible melted humans. Some of the coolest characters are actually ghouls, though.
Yeah. But then they live for however long.
Yeah, they live for seemingly an infinite amount of time until they get shot or maimed or killed by a horribly two-headed bear or some shit like that. which is actually another good thing that I should point out too before we end this first episode, which is that wildlife has been mutated by this. You have the super mutants. You have the Yao Guai, which is actually Chinese, and that's the two-headed bear.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the Brahmin, which are the two-headed cows, which are still used as resources, which I think is kind of funny. Two-headed deer. Basically, everything has two heads now.
Yeah.
You got the mole rats, and you have
Rats.
the cockroaches are now rad roaches, which
Yeah.
are like 5 feet big.
Really cool roaches.
Yeah, and then you have flame-spitting fire ants. But actually, you find that out in Fallout 3. But the fire ants are kind of more humans doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a scientist, which you find in a fucking subway tunnel under DC, decided to experiment with the ants and actually made them breathe fire on accident. And he takes no credibility for it too. He's like the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah. I killed if you kill the ant, like the queen ant, he gets pissed at you. He's like, why would you do that? I'm like,
they breathe fucking fire.
Fuck you. What?
Because I don't want these fucking things.
You haven't improved our situation. You don't have a track record of this, man. But yeah, and then we are in the modern day, my friend. So I think that's what we'll call it from there. Can you wrap up what we have we've said?
Yeah, so we did a little bit of a dive into Bethesda's beginnings with the Fallout games, how it started with Wasteland, which was run by Interplay.
Oh, yeah, first developed by Interplay.
Wasteland, which was like the precursor to, or the progenitor to Fallout. Then they created Fallout, which seems like just to kind of get away from EA's grasp.
There's a certain irony now thinking about it that Interplay, in its infancy, created 2 franchises that by different companies would become big.
Yeah,
like the Wasteland.
Wasteland because
of
the EA, and then they give Fallout away.
In Exile and Bethesda.
Yeah, they give it to Bethesda, and then Bethesda blows it up into this huge ass franchise.
It's kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, it's like we can always open the door, but we can't walk through.
I know. Yeah. We need to stop making good franchises for other people.
Let's give them some shit. Once Fallout was Bethesda's baby, blows up into Fallout 3 was their first Bethesda's first Fallout game, which was simply because they needed something in between the release of Morrowind and Oblivion, because they knew Oblivion was going to take some time, which is cool. Other than that, we went into the kind of the background story of how the Fallout happened, how you are, where the game starts, which is, it seems like in every single game, you start inside a vault, coming out of a vault from this
the only one that
wasteland.
The only one that you don't come out of a vault with is the one that was the game that was developed by Obsidian, not by Bethesda, which is Fallout New Vegas, which I didn't really go into. But Fallout New Vegas is actually, because of how Bethesda Game Studio was so knee-deep into Skyrim at that point. I mean, don't get me wrong, Bethesda was big, but they could not do Skyrim and New Vegas at the same time. So they said, I think it was a corporate level decision. They're like, all right, well, let's give this,
we'll shunt it off to somebody else.
Give it over to Obsidian, which they ended up making my favorite game, which is awesome.
Knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, they did an incredible job. So technically, you don't start off in New Vegas in a vault. You start off, which I just showed you that stupid meme of one of the major New Vegas heads shoots you in the head because he steals the platinum chip, which was going to Mr. House at the time, which is you find out is one of like the major
protagonists.
He's also one of the reasons why New Vegas wasn't nuked, or Las Vegas wasn't nuked, because he was paranoid and always preparing. So he knew that there was an apocalypse, that this was going to get nuked, and he managed to prevent most of the nuclear apocalypse from hitting that strip area. Yeah, he was very insightful. But that whole story was because he's like, I want to take over the strip or whatever, so I shoot you, and then eventually you like survive a shot to the head, which is crazy. But that's the only time that you ever don't start out in the vault.
Okay, so short of Fallout New Vegas, every other titled game, you start out coming out of a vault, waking up to this post-apocalyptic nightmare society that we've kind of touched on a little bit, but we really didn't go into too many of the storylines about these games.
This was all kind of the preface.
I don't think I missed anything, did I?
No, everything's just about right.
And then next episode, what's the plan for next episode then?
Yeah, next episode we'll start off with where you are.
Okay, so right into
what's going on, like what's Fallout all about in terms of when you put on that controller, you jump right into the crazy world of Fallout. What the fuck the deal is with Vault-Tec and all that shit. We'll go from there.
I'm excited. I'm very excited. And I guess we're done.
Uranium fever has done and got me down. Uranium fever is spreading all around. With a Geiger counter in my hand,
I'm going out to stake me some government land.
uranium fever has done and got me down. Well, I took my Geiger and I started to climb right up to the top where I thought I'd find a hunk of rock that'd make it click just like I'd read about Vernon Pick. On the second day, I made the top, and I'm telling you, Steve, I was ready to stop. The only clicking that I heard that day was the bones in my back that had gone astray. Uranium fever has done and got me down. Uranium fever, it's spreading all around. With a Geiger counter in my hand,
I'm going out to stake me some government land.
uranium fever has done and got me down. Well, you pack up your things, you head out again into some unknown spot where nobody's been. You reach the spot where your fortune lies. You find it's been staked by 17 other guys. Well, I ain't kidding, I ain't gonna quit. That bug's done caught me and I've been bit. So with a Geiger counter and a pick in my hand, I'll keep right on staking that government land. Uranium fever has done and got me down. Uranium fever is spreading all around. With a Geiger counter in my hand,
I'm going out to stake me some government land.
uranium fever has done